How do y'all, you delicious people? So I don't think I ever graded this actual episode, so I'm gonna do this just at the beginning here. So this, of course, is Wolfpack Season 1, Episode 3. So I want to say that this episode was, for most of it, to just be like this mega crap episode. It was like beyond even awful. But then that ending, though. So with that said, I feel that this goes on from like being mostly a mega crap, just boring episode, to at some point going on and just being bad. So like it goes from a heavy shift, because at least it does a lot of things that the second episode didn't go on and do, or it just also has some interesting bit of dialogue, even though most of this episode just feels like a heavy recap of what has already happened, or there's a lot of questions that just kind of go nowhere for this episode. So, with that said, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of this review. Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to view Wolfpack Season 1, Episode 3. So, on a side note, I had gone on through like a WWE theme song of Rhea Ripley, found a band called Motionless in White, and come to find out, one of their latest songs, I guess, is the song called Werewolf. And listened to that, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked it, and would have liked to have found like a ringtone for it, but I guess that's not going to happen. But I was to really start to enjoy some Motionless in White. I also listened to like Cyberhex. But yeah, so the little bit of a side note there, but like Werewolf song and also this show. So that was a really good song. So with that said, Wolfpack. So this episode is to mostly be boring, but that ending though. So we have, of course, the werewolf getting used in this episode, and there is some bad CGI, but also there is some interesting moments by the tail end of this episode. So we have me want to state about this episode that it feels mostly like a cop show episode. And normally, I don't really like cop shows unless there is some kind of element introduced to it also, where it's like, yeah, it's a cop show, but it's mostly like in the future, or it has like a sci-fi or fantasy or some kind of other angle that ties into it, to where it's like, okay, I can get into this. Like, I can like this kind of show. There has to be something drastically uh, different than just any normal cop show, because it just seems so boring that way. We have me state in this episode that this show, it seems, is to now reject that it is to really be called a werewolf show. It's very bizarre. Because we have characters that go on and refuse to say the word werewolf. We have the group of Harlan, Luna, Everett, and Blake, who are to call themselves the Pack. So they're cutting the title of the show in half, as if they're going to rename the show The Pack now, to try to tell people, no, it's not a werewolf show, you're wrong. As well as also kind of teasing us on if there is going to be a werewolf transformation or not. Basically telling us, like, well, like, we could not have our characters transform into werewolf at all, or maybe they will. And so I'm like, really? So you're gonna get my hopes up, or just make me want to just be like, click because of that? That is a stupid idea, and really, at this point, will make a lot of people even more so hesitant by after I'm to talk about the show than they probably were. So, with that said, Uh, we had, for most of this episode, I felt that I would have given a grading for this episode to be mega crap, but that ending though. So it kind of went from like mega crap to like bad by just like little bit of the ending here. I also didn't like how they were to bring in that cop named Miller, and he was to be very aggressive, and I was like, really? Like we're gonna do that in this show? Wow. Uh, and we also had quite a bit of teasing of these make out scenes, but then we realized that, oh, no, it's all just a fantasy, or it's all just this or that. And I was like, really? There was quite a bit about this episode that I thought was just like, man, boring. This is a boring way to start this. This is a boring scene. It got to the point where I think somewhere I was thinking, could you just describe a fart to me? Because that would be just as fascinating as where you're going with this dialogue. So yeah, with that said, I'm gonna have maybe possibly some funny anecdotes when we go into here. And so with that said, I think it's about that time to just double five this bad boy up. Because it's about that time, of course, going into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time again to spoil these episodes. So, we have a car in the beginning of this episode that drives up to a construction site with characters that we may be familiar with, both Austin and Phoebe. But again, like these characters were only to be seen on the first episode, so people are like, yeah, I don't know who these characters are. So I completely forgot about them. So Phoebe is to turn her head in a very unusual way to, I guess, really show, like, oh yeah, we should probably know this character. But it kind of comes off like, man, that like head turn was just very bizarre. And plus, also the way they kind of closed up on her, like I was expecting like her name to come across the board. It was very weird, or come across the screen somewhere, because I just thought that was so weird. So we come to find these characters that are making their way into this construction site, and we have them starting to walk up these stairs, and then we show a massive number of stairs. I'm like, oh my god, please don't tell me that we're just gonna have this be like a huge like whole like them walking up all these stairs. And I was like, man, this looks like a boring opening. Like they should really have chopped the crap out of this because there wasn't anything really going on anyways. So we find, besides Phoebe, we have other characters named Cyrus, Tia, who of course we are unfamiliar with, and Austin, who of course was to be the character that had gotten grabbed from the smoke on the pilot episode, having Everett telling him, hey, get back on the bus because something's out here, and then he gets grabbed. And this is to not be a flashback from a prior moment before Austin had got, like, so this is the follow-up. And when immediately I was to see these characters, I'm like, okay, so is this after the bus situation, or is it, like, before? Like, I wasn't really understanding of when this actually was, but then once they started to talk further, I was like, oh, okay, so this is afterwards. But shouldn't Austin have some kind of bite mark? Shouldn't he have some kind of thing that was to tell us that he was to be grabbed or attacked by something? Because that would have made a rational amount of sense. I would have thought that Austin was dead. But it seems that they went on and really enjoyed this actor, so they continued to have him here. So, even it seems in this episode they are to almost connect him to another character to at some point maybe have them have a relationship between one another in the show. So moving on. So they make their way into this building that, of course, is to be a construction site that's like after hours, it's all night, like nobody's really there, like there isn't like much of security or whatever kind of watching over this place. So, what a boring way to start a show. Cyrus wants the group to see the canyons from this construction site because it's so high up. And we go on and ask other we go on and have like Phoebe or maybe Tia that is to go on and ask like if this place is safe, and Austin's like, well, of course it's not, it's a construction site, what are you thinking? So, and that's when I was to draw the conclusion. I'm like, okay, so when is this happening? Is this to have happened prior, or is it to like is this to tell us that they were the ones who started the fire? But we don't really get into that. So the further and further the group talks. So the group looks at the forest fire, and Phoebe talks as if this is the apocalypse happening. Austin says there's already suspicion on who started the fire, and someone from their school is a possibility. Maybe even someone that was on that bus that Austin and Phoebe were on could have suspicion. And I was like, wait a minute, like, didn't these people just get up for their morning like bus? So like, how is it that these people could have had time to, like, I thought that this was like a morning pickup kind of thing instead of it being like a field trip of sorts. I hope they would go on to explain that a little bit more. So Phoebe has a theory of who it could be, and immediately she blames Blake, because they kind of set that up in the pilot that Blake and Phoebe hate one another. So I guess that is to really just build a story off of, I guess. Anyways, so talking about how Blake last year, after her parents got divorced, Blake started to go really just off the grid, meaning she got rid of her cell phone and was to not be on social media, and started to drop quite a bit of her friends. Tia realizes that Phoebe only has suspicion over Blake because Phoebe was one of Blake's former friends that Blake just decided to just drop. So Phoebe asks if Blake was arrested tomorrow, would any of them be surprised? And so we have Cyrus that actually likes that Phoebe doesn't have a phone. It's like, yeah, like I think that's really cool. All of a sudden, when Phoebe is trying to get a selfie, she's like, yeah, like, let's get me in the background of this fire, because this is probably going to only happen once or continue to happen, and Phoebe can get all the selfies that she wants. And so while Phoebe is trying to get a selfie, we have Phoebe who can further just back almost to where she is to fall. Austin grabs her and is to, like, well, yeah, like, you're one of those stupid people that are gonna die because you were trying to take a selfie. I think I would go on to, like, have a number of people that at certain points would try to take, like, selfies on movies and shows, and they don't, like, realize how far they are, and then they're just like, and then they... Stupid people. I think at even one point there were, like, certain people who would try to take, like, a selfie at, like, a subway station, and they would, like, fall, and I'm like, yeah, that's stupid. So Phoebe all of a sudden is to hear something or someone all of a sudden, but then cops arrive. Austin asks who is the one who is to give away the location, and Tia did, because her parents would get very upset if she, of course, didn't share her location, probably on her cell phone, to her parents. So the kids end up, or the teens, however you want to go on and state this, because I feel that probably quite a bit of these people are to probably be of a almost adult like age. So I'm gonna throw words around like kids or teens or whatever, because we have Harlan that states that he is 18, and so that would technically be an adult, but still, these characters are to be quite young compared to a lot of other people. So I guess they're to be called teens, I guess. Even the show, I think, can't exactly determine whether or not to call them kids or teens or whatever. So they just kind of have a wild combination of things to describe them. So we going to have the kids get picked up by cops, as Cyrus says that they were just there to see the fire, and it's like, well, yeah, you're going to be seeing an inside of the jail cell because this is trespassing. So now we go back to the group that we are supposed to see on the show instead of these random other people that I guess we will kind of get kind of like flashes of them being on the show at certain points. So Everett says, or Everett starts asking a lot of questions about Harlan. Or no, so Everett starts asking a lot of questions, and Harlan tells him to shut up. We have Everett, Harlan, Luna, and Blake all in this cop car, and Officer Jason and Kristen are kind of just kind of making their way to this police station to question our characters. Luna and Harlan assume that Everett has anxiety, but Harlan is like, well, yeah, he's definitely having something. Officer Jason continues to like, hey, bah, 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 bah. He's like, hey, quiet down there. Like, I don't want you guys like figuring out some side story that you're all gonna have the same thing of, and try to just use that against us, because that's what basically happens in this episode. So, but Officer Jason is like banging, and he's like, hey, stop that talking, or don't even whisper either, because that's what you're gonna do after I go on and do this once. So Blake asks if they will be arrested. Kirsten tells them that they are just being questioned. Funny enough, we have Kristen later on that states is like, oh yeah, every single one of these teens were all like volunteering for them to be questioned. No. All these people were basically taken. Like, if anything, if I were Everett, I'm like, man, like these cops are kind of harassing me because they had gone on to question me before, and now they're obtaining me again for more questioning. It's like, man, I feel like I'm getting harassed, because this has happened more than once now. And then at some point, we could also state that when Miller arrives at Luna and Harlan's house, like that could even go into a third time of which that like these cops have just consistently tried to question these people. But so Blake wants her parents to be called as Everett starts freaking out about his parents. It's like, oh my god, my parents. And Kristen wants the group to call their own parents because she's lazy. She's like, hey man, I was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm not going to be calling all your parents. I got better things to do with my life. And yes, Blake, I realize that you don't have your own cell phone, but still. So, Blake gives Everett an item that will hopefully calm him down. So, we have at first where like Everett takes this item and he's not even looking at it. He just has his eyes closed, and he's almost like squeezing it. And Blake is like, no, like do this, just hit these buttons and hit these things on it, and like this will definitely calm you down. So Jason tells the group, hey, we've arrived here. So we all of a sudden see Owen with this kind of like megaphone or this like megahorn, whatever word of which that you would call this big massive thing, like, whoop, hey everybody, like, if you're in from this city, like you're gonna go to this blue table, you're gonna go to this red table, you're gonna go to this white table, you're gonna, hey, if you came from here, we don't have anything set up for you yet, so F off. Until we have a megaphone that goes on and it's to tell you where to go. So Luna gets close to a cop riding a horse, and all of a sudden the horses just start to like back up and start to freak out. So we have the continuation of Luna, who is to either get freaked out by horses or her freaking out horses. It's, I don't know why that is. Maybe that is Luna's secret power, is that she freaks out horses. I don't know. It's very weird. So Kristen redirects Luna to come with her because it's like, well, hey, Luna, right? Like, you need to come with me because I need to question you. Like, don't be going on and spending so much time with these horses. I get that they're really cool, but come on down. You're the next contestant on. You're probably going to get questioned next. So Everett notices Tia being grabbed by her mother, and we, I think, have Harlan that is to listen in on what is to go on here, because we start to realize that certain one of these pack members are to have certain abilities. We come to find out in this episode that Luna has a sense of smell, which, wow, that's fantastic. That seems like a great ability, right, to have. Like, Wolverine just barely ever used it, but hey, like, Harlan is to have a hearing ability, and so I'm like, great, these powers are fascinating. Yeah, I'm so thrilled. But it seems that Blake and Everett are to have the more cool powers, as we find out in this episode that Everett is really strong, and Blake can run really fast, but only at a certain point of time. So, that must just suck. So, back into the story. So, we go on to have Everett, who is to notice Tia, and Tia's mother is grabbing her. It's like, well, hey, now you're not going to get into college because you have a criminal record. Harlan overhears what Tia and her mother was talking about. We all of a sudden are to go into finding out that they are really effing stretching out this moment here, as we all of a sudden get into this kind of like very like bullet time like moment where like everything is to just be slowed down and everything is much slower than what it was, and we're just like, oh, what is this? Oh, this is great. And so we go on to have Harlan, who is to kind of overhear about certain requests of certain beds. Like, there's a person that is to demand like 5 beds from some location and stuff like that, and people are just like, man, this is insane. Like, all the people that we have to evacuate and put into other locations, and like, it's insane. We also have Jason, who's waving over Miller, who we will find out is to be a much more important character than we were to thought he was going to be in this episode, to the point of me even thinking that I wouldn't need to even know this person's name. But yeah, luckily I heard it first off, and we'll find out if I can go on and remember what this character's name is when we get more dialogue here. So, Harlan sees Cyrus making a phone call, as we come to find out in the beginning of this episode that Cyrus is to state that he's gay. And so I'm like, okay, is Harlan again gonna have another makeout scene with random guy? But come to find out, Harlan finally isn't doing any makeout scenes in this episode. I was surprised. I was shocked. Because I was assuming that Harlan, again, has to make out with another guy in this episode. But come to find out, we do have makeout scenes between both Blake and Everett in this episode. But they come out to just really be this clickbaiting, like, oh no, it's just like a fantasy. Because both of them are having this kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger end of days thing where they're just really going on to just be like, man, like I just want to just be in bed with this person. I just want to make out with this person, and I'm so attracted to them, and it's just undeniable. And because, of course, if anybody's gone on and seen the Arnold Schwarzenegger End of Days movie, yeah, again, we have the woman that goes on and states that it's like, oh yeah, well, like, I don't think I can not give in to this guy because I've been dreaming about him since I was very young. And so that's the whole ordeal. So at some point I'm just waiting for Everett and Blake and whoever to just go crazy. Because they're just like, man. And plus we won't know when it's actually legit and when it's not legit. But there were some moments, I think, in the other episode where they had almost kissed, and then they got interrupted by that. Moving on, because I went in too long for this. So, Cyrus is making a phone call as all of a sudden Cyrus notices Harlan. Harlan is forced to sit down by Miller, and Blake asks Phoebe what she is doing here, and Phoebe just was to be questioned about the fire, and so Phoebe immediately blames Blake, even though she doesn't know for sure. She's just like, well, yeah, I think if anybody might be suspicious, it's that Blake girl, because she dropped me from her Fave 5, so I'm ticked. So we go on to have Phoebe ask Harlan if he's stolen any boyfriends lately, and Harlan's in replies, no, I've just stolen yours, and that's it, as she gives him the finger as she goes away. Blake asks everybody, it's like, is Phoebe just joking? Like, she didn't really just accuse me of doing this, right? She didn't accuse me of that fire. So Everett wants a lawyer. He wants to lawyer it up. Blake is willing to just go on and confess everything, just tell everyone the truth, even though it probably would sound irrational to be like, yeah, I think I'm turning into a werewolf. And we, of course, have Sarah Michelle Gellar that's like, well, I have some experience in that kind of... I've had some experience in that kind of part of a realm of show. Again, we're thinking that Kristen is to basically just be Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but she's not. But still, it's the same actress. But yeah. Like, she's been around a bump in the night or two. Anyways, so we, of course, have Harlan, who is to just state, it's like, well, hey, like, if you guys go on and just confess everything, or if you guys lawyer up, like, that is not a good idea. Like, that'll make you seem more suspicious, and they're probably just going to arrest you right out of the gate. So he comes up with the idea, Harlan, that maybe they should try to do a fairly weak crime that maybe they won't get arrested for, but maybe it'll come off as like a very believable story. So Harlan states that they were all together smoking some weed, smoking some J, and Harlan is stated, it's like, well, if we all had that same story, then we'll probably get out of here without heavily being questioned. And Everett says that he won't ever smoke weed because at some point he had tried an edible, and it just made him even more anxiety ridden. And here's the thing, because I had gone on and seen certain podcasts like Joe Rogan's and all kinds of things, and so not stating that I have any real experience in this, but I had heard that like edibles are so much more worse off than actually just smoking weed. People can go on and let me know if they've experienced some weed puffing or some edible taken, because for me, I of course would never want to go on and smoke weed because I am just concerned, because I am to be very allergic to cigarette smoke, and I don't know if that's the exact same thing. But either way, I probably would get sick from it. So that's why I would never go on and smoke weed, because I'm just concerned that I would probably get sick. So, not just trying to come up with a reason to not smoke weed, it's just my thought. So, and of course I'd heard from like Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm like, man, like weed, yeah, it's very worse off. So that's what I heard from a person or two. So Harlan says Everett is being way too difficult. It's like, man, like you're just gonna be that guy, aren't you? So Everett asks Austin what he saw from like what had attacked him from before, when Austin was grabbing Everett and is telling him, get back into the bus, like there's something out here, and he gets grabbed from the pilot. Everett goes on and grabs Austin, like, what did you see? And like Austin's like, I didn't see nothing, like I didn't see shit. And Austin just walks away. So in my brain I'm like, so doesn't that kind of ruin the pilot for you? To just be like, what was Austin even talking about? And now he doesn't have like this traumatic thing from this episode to have tied into that first one. And so, like, was Austin just tripping on acid at that point? Was he high on something and doesn't want to have like stated what he really saw from that pilot episode? I have that question. So Luna all of a sudden has her heart is beating 2 times this day, and we all of a sudden have Harlan that is looking over at Luna like, wait a minute, so like, do you like that Austin guy? And Luna's like, shut up. And Harlan is just like, yeah, like, I'm sure you like him. I can hear your heartbeat. So, the officers call in Everett and Blake simultaneously at the same time, as Everett is to seemingly be mostly the one questioned, and then the rest of the kids, like, they don't really matter, in all honesty. Like, Miller does go on and question Harlan by aggressively questioning him, but still. So, when Kristen is to enter into Everett's room, she puts on this white noise machine to cancel out all the other noises, so that way they won't get distracted. And so it seems that both Everett and Kristen were to know what a white noise machine is because they had both sought out therapy. To where it seems that both Everett and Kristen are to possibly both be dealing with anxiety, it seems. And so there's some really interesting common ground here that I do like, but really I think that this is also just Kristen like really being good at interrogating people, so I can't really go on and have Kristen believe that like she is to really have this be a part of her character. It's just her song and dance that she's going on and having to put up here. So that kind of sucks, because I don't know if what Kristen is really telling us is honest for her character, or it's just some like thing to try and connect with her would-be questioner. So Kristen mentions Connor and brings him up about him being missing and how Connor was to have broken his leg in an unusual manner to try and get free from something. Maybe having Kristen draw the conclusion that Everett had tried to chase Connor, and Connor, to try and get free, might have broken his leg to run away from Everett because Everett is to be the only one there. Or really, there is nothing of a body that they found of Connor, and so they can't draw a conclusion like, oh no, he was mauled by some animal. So Kristen is to also mention that Connor hasn't been answering his phones, and left in the same manner as Everett did when Everett was in the hospital also. Like, Everett tried to sneak away from his hospital bed, ripping out his IV to get the heck out of there. And Jason draws that conclusion. So, Kirsten asks if Connor or anyone Everett knows might have started the fire. Because again, we're going to that Billy Joel song, "We Didn't Start the Fire." Anyways, as well as also the werewolf song from Motionless in White. Feels like I'm trying to promote something, but I'm not. Like, I'm just like, that song was really good. I really liked it. Anyways, moving on. So Everett asks if they're actually looking for Connor, because of course it seems that they're not. They could give a rip about Connor, because it seems that there's a higher suspicion on Everett, Blake, Luna, and Harlan than there is on this Connor guy. Like, this guy could have been the ultimate character who could have done all this, and instead we're questioning these people and just wasting time when obviously they are probably not to be the ones who started the fire. Moving on. So Kristen redirects the question from off of talking about Connor to now back to Everett. Kristen has a witness placing Everett, Blake, Luna, Harlan at Stone Ridge at the origin of the fire. And to me, this is basically just a recapping of the scene when they all four were together and had those yellow eyes, and then they bumped into the park rangers. And so this is basically a recap. So Everett states that they were smoking some J, they were smoking that sweet weed. Everett has to describe what kind of weed he, of course, was to have. And to me, at this point, I was like, how about you just describe a fart to me? Who gives a crap what kind of weed he was having? Like, as if he really knew exactly what kind of or way of which that this was to be. We even have me to, of course, know that Kevin Smith is to have had a weed shop of his own. Kevin Smith, of course, the guy who is to be on YouTube, and if you don't know who he is, he's the guy who was Silent Bob on Jay and Silent Bob, or in the movie Clerks, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. Weed. I bizarrely know a lot about weed for whatever goofy reason, because it's interesting to know about it, but no, I'm not going to have any of it. Everett has to describe what kind of weed, and Everett is to go on and mention that he was to puff away on a edible, something that you would consume into your mouth instead of be popping out like it's nobody's business. And so Kristen then goes on to have to go in and state what Everett had just said. So he's like, so you went on to smoke a edible, a thing that you would consume and eat? Yeah. we all of a sudden have Harlan, who is to overhear this because super hearing, and he's to be like, God, like, Everett, you are so stupid. And he's just annoyed by Everett's stupidity. And Harlan corrects Everett's story, and Everett can hear exactly what Harlan said and repeats it. Harlan realizes Everett can hear him and wants Everett to answer if he can. And so we have Everett that replies, yes. And Harlan's like, oh my god, you can hear me? Ah! But then we all of a sudden realize that Luna and Blake can also hear Harlan also. Man, hopefully none of these four characters have to go on and take a dump in a house, because you could go on and hear that person just taking a dump. Uh, so Harlan will give them all their stories so that way they can all kind of quickly get out of here. Everett asks again why they're wasting time on him and should be looking for Connor. Kristen asks if there's a reason Connor may not be found, or Harlan wants Everett to stop talking about Connor and answer Kristen so they can get the heck out of here quickly. We all of a sudden have Officer Miller that is to overhear Harlan like just touching this wall and kind of listening in. And so Officer Miller goes on to ask Harlan, like, who are you talking to? And Harlan's like, answers no one. It's like, sure, like, I think you're talking to somebody. I think you have some magical werewolf power that we're not aware of, and you can just talk to everyone. I think that's what's going on here. So that would have been a great reveal, right? If Miller just knew that, it would be great. So Miller forces Harlan to sit and talk to him, as Everett wants a lawyer and to call his parents, his mama and papa. When we all of a sudden have Kristen who's like, well, yeah, you go ahead and you call your own parents on your own cell phone, because again, I'm not going to call them for you. Everett tries to go on and call his parents, but then he's like, I don't really want to do this. So Everett talks to Kristen again about anxiety instead of going on and calling his parents. And Kristen would also get anxiety before she would fall asleep, because I guess she just had this fear of something was going to bump in the night while she was fast asleep, and there was nothing that she could control during that time because sleeping. And so she would all of a sudden talk about something that would attack her while she slept, like a saber-toothed tiger. Was Sarah Michelle Gellar a big fan of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers? What's going to attack her next? A Tyrannosaurus! But I feel that dinosaur-like things are going to attack me after I watch way too much Power Rangers. So Everett isn't worried about a saber-toothed tiger, even though he has a werewolf on the loose after him. As Kristen asks what he is worried about, maybe a show getting a cancellation fairly too soon, because it feels like this show should probably end up becoming that. Or not remembering his lines. What's the worry, Everett? What is the worry? I know I would probably be worried most about not remembering my lines, because especially if I have like a huge monologue of stuff, or I'd have to be working with somebody, I'd just be worried, like, man, I'm gonna crap the bed if I can't go on and remember like one what, or one huh, or one who, or one something, because those lines are so simple to probably forget, much more so than like a long stretch of something that you're stating, because at least you can figure out some way to memorize that. Because I had gone on and at some point in high school done an acting class once or twice. And certain certain things of dialogue would just be like, okay, like I have to find something really interesting about this dialogue because I have to remember it somehow. There'd be some plays and certain things from like, man, this dialogue, I don't think I can remember it because it's just nothing that I can find fascinating. So it would just be like certain things would be easier to memorize than others. And plus, also, I'd have to like figure out the lines and like do it for a whole week and finally, hopefully, get most of them down. Moving on. So we have Harlan that wants a lawyer, and so he does even the exact same thing that he told Everett not to do. Miller gets a little rough and with Harlan, and Miller wants to arrest Harlan for assaulting an officer. Not quite sure exactly how that plays out, but right after that happens, we have Garrett who is to kind of walk in and stops what is going on here, and Garrett tells Miller to get his hands off his son, or there will be an assault charge after all. So Phoebe talks to her dad at her car, and so Phoebe's father is to go on and talk about like, well, hey, like I want names and I want badge numbers. I'm gonna call the DA about this. Like this isn't right. This is bull hockey. And so Phoebe all of a sudden notices when she gets to her car that she realizes she has one whole flat tire. Phoebe's dad will pick her up as now all of a sudden Phoebe has two flat tires that all of a sudden happen. And I'm like, oh my god, I am so scared during this scene. Two whole flat tires. What the heck is going on with this car? Now, all of a sudden, we then get count them, three flat tires as Phoebe's dad wants to know what's going on. And I'm shaking in my non-feet wearing boots. And be afraid. Be very afraid. Phoebe tells her dad that the tires are all flat. All four of them. The next thing we see is that Phoebe's car alarm is just bizarrely going off. What the heck is even going on in this car? Man, Phoebe, you know what? I also want to go on and really just call this show like eye candy. There's some really just attractive people in this show because it's not even called Wolfpack anymore. It's just to be called the Pack. But like it should just be called eye candy because there's a lot of attractive actors and actresses on the show. But everybody good looking, they are. At certain points, we'll have to have them be nasty characters, but still. So Garrett and Harlan walk off as Kristen talks to Garrett about being glad Garrett's okay, and Garrett wants a lawyer unless his kids are being charged with anything. Kristen tells Garrett that they were being questioned and that everyone volunteered for this, which is bullshit. And Blake calls them out on that. I'm like, dude, I didn't volunteer for this. You. Luna tells Garrett to protect Everett and Blake because they're one of them. They're like one of them. And we just consistently have Luna who says this line through the rest of the episode, it seems like. Yeah, you're one of us. You're the same. You're blah, 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 blah. Yeah, Luna, we get it. Like, werewolf bite and born this way, we get it. Like, how many times do you have to just say that they're the exact same thing because they're a wolf pack and they're all whatever. Anyways, so just nail it on that coffin there, Luna. Just nail it. Just do it. So Garrett takes the teens and drives off as Everett explains what had happened to Everett and Blake with their bites, and that, of course, there had also been this other kid called Connor, and that he had gotten this shot that could have possibly actually cured him from being a werewolf. Maybe that would have been the whole like seizure thing that he had, or that weird thing that he had where he all of a sudden could not go on and sleep. Maybe that was a cure. I don't know. But maybe at some point we're just gonna have like the werewolf like go on and maybe get injected with what they were trying to do with Connor, because that would have made a lot of sense. So Everett talks about if they we good. Garrett goes on and talks to Everett and is like, well, hey, like, you guys were getting phone calls, right? It's like, well, do you guys know who it was? Everett says the person knew him and where he was, and told him he would be killed by the next full moon. We have later, at some point, Everett is to go on and ask both Luna and Harlan. It's like, well, like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean that we're gonna get killed like right before the full moon? Are we gonna get killed during? Are we gonna get killed after? Like, should we have to wait till it's daylight savings time? And is that when we're gonna get killed? I don't know. Nobody has any answers. So Blake asks where they're going, as Luna tells them they need to stay together because they're like them. Blake needs to go back to her hotel because she has to watch over her brother Danny, and also her father Roberto, who could probably be drunk. We don't know. So, because it seems like that guy is an alcoholic, so he's probably like drunk all the time. He's probably a walking drunken man. It probably is what it is. Even when he's driving drunk. So Blake needs so Garrett is willing to drive them anywhere both Everett and Blake need to go, but wants to hear the whole story from them, and if they can tell what bit them, etc. And it doesn't really seem we really get there. It doesn't really seem like they go on and tell Garrett the whole story. It just kind of feels like we leave off at that. So Garrett thought it came from him, or came after him, the alpha werewolf. Harlan says that Garrett saw their real father, the real dad, the real pop-up. So we go back to the police station, and so Miller is talking to Kristen. Miller asks why the teens aren't to be arrested, and Kristen believes they didn't do it. They didn't do anything. And so it's like, why do they keep questioning them then? Like, we've had Kristen, who is to have asked now Blake twice, or Everett twice, like, hey, what's going on? Do you know? Like, she also gave him that sweet message in the pilot episode. Like, man, like, Kristen is really just harassing these people at this point. So we have Kristen that states, like, well, they could be hiding something, but it isn't that they started this fire. Like, that is obvious. And so what, of course, Kristen is to possibly think that they're hiding, we don't know. She doesn't state it right away. Like, well, it must be that they're werewolves, because I know. No, she doesn't state it. Maybe that they're low-budget werewolves. Maybe is that the thing they're hiding? Miller would have gotten a confession, as Kristen tells Miller, if you put a hand on those teens, that she is going to take him off the task force. Ooh, like, if anybody for being a person that is to be too rough with people, like, I'm sure Miller is just gonna be like, well, yeah, I should now back down because Kristen tells me not to. Yeah, I'm just gonna stop doing what I'm doing now. Yeah, that's really gonna stop a guy like that. So Kristen looks at evidence again from the pilot episode that we saw, where she's looking at this thing. She's like, what could this be? Uh, while the town is still burning, because nobody really cares about the town burning. They're just like, man, I hope the town just burns up. Like, I'm like, everybody's the Joker in this town, and they just want to watch the world burn, it seems. So, Everett has questions for Garrett also, as Garrett is just as much in the dark as Everett is. So, yeah, so Everett's like, well, hey, like, about this whole werewolf thing, and Garrett's like, dude, like, you're asking the wrong guy. Like, even if you go on and ask both Luna and Harlan, who have been born werewolves, like, they don't even know anything about this as much as you would. So Blake realizes, has Harlan and Luna been werewolves for long or longer? As Luna tells them they're one of them. Again, Blake realizes not exactly like one of them, because like Blake is kind of looking at Luna up and down, like, well, yeah, like, I don't have the legs that you do, I don't have the chest that you have, like, I'm not blonde like you are, I don't have the ripped just arms like you do. So yeah, not exactly like one of them. Garrett wants to question Everett and Blake after talking to his kids. Garrett tells his kids that Everett and Blake aren't the same. They've been bitten. Who knows what could happen? Yeah, they could even become a goat instead of a werewolf. Isn't that great? Lana says nothing has ever happened to them on a full moon. So that tells us, is this show just a freaking clickbaiting werewolf thing? Is that what's really going on here? Am I going to start getting really ticked off the more that we realize that nothing is ever going to happen? Are they just milking this out? F you, show, for even trying to do that. So, after hearing that, I'm like, well, what is even the point of this show then? If you're going to tell us that it's not a werewolf show anymore, you're going to tell us that there may not be a transformation ever going on. So we would, of course, have Garrett go on and at some point state that, like, well, hey, like, now since you guys are in a pack, like, it might be very much different here. And we could go on and have you, of course, got, like, it seems like they keep throwing words like connected around, and immediately when I heard the word connected, I'm like, man, this seems like Iron Man 3. It's like, yeah, I know why you're cold, because we're connected. Yeah, that's what I got. So their eyes were going too, and Harlan asks if Garrett is curious if Everett and Blake will turn into actual werewolves and kill a deer or kill Bambi or whoever. Just kill any of the Disney characters off. Hopefully that's all they do, as they've never experienced a pack before, or a wolf pack. Show in the title. Blake is all of a sudden fantasizing about making out with Everett, as we then have to realize that it is just a dream or a fantasy. As Everett asks about trying to find Connor, Blake wants them to just be here for the night on the full moon, because she is drawing a conclusion that it could just be safer off to have them be here instead of going on and being back at her place, because she could put her family in danger, as well as Everett putting his parents in danger also. Everett is to realize that Blake is to really believe in all this werewolf nonsense. Blake got a call also telling her she wasn't safe, but interpreted as Danny and her dad aren't safe. So that's where I'm kind of getting what I just stated. So, or maybe she was also at a baseball game sliding into home plate, and the umpire was like, "You're not safe." Because maybe that could be what it is. So, Harlan gets a message from Phoebe talking about her tires getting slashed, assuming Blake did it. Harlan very confused about why he was even to get this message. And we, of course, have Everett say it's like, well, like, obviously, because Blake doesn't have a phone, Phoebe assumes that you're her friend, and so she called you instead. So, Luna asks if Blake really slashed Phoebe's tires, as she couldn't have because Everett is a state like, dude, she was with me the whole time. And when she wasn't in the interrogation room, like, we never could have saw her slip out and slash these tires. So Garrett asks for Phoebe's address, and Harlan immediately knows what the address is, claiming that at some point Harlan had slept with Phoebe's boyfriend at Phoebe's house. Really getting some real vicious revenge going on there. So, or some vicious, like, attack there. Garrett tells Blake and Everett to call their parents to stay here. And Everett's grounded and Blake needs to watch over Danny. So then Garrett is to say, like, well, like, I need a minute because he wants to go on and check out if Phoebe's okay. If she's not dead, then maybe Garrett will just go on and just send both Everett and Blake home and then get the whole story the following day. So Garrett drives off as Miller watches Garrett from a distance. Everett asks Harlan if the voice meant they will be killed before or after the first full moon. Yeah, I stated that already. Harlan would not even know that answer. And so Luna tells them during the full moon their senses are heightened. Hopefully they have a sixth sense so that way they can see dead people. That's what I thought. So as they all of a sudden have to rush to lock all the windows because they smell something. Everybody just lock all the windows because if any werewolf could just break through a window fairly easily, but hey, lock all the windows. Everett asks what special abilities does they all have, which I've already technically explained that. So, Everett puts on a high frequency sound, and all of a sudden we have Everett who's to act like, well, hey, can you all hear this? And Harlan's like, well, yeah, I can hear it. Could you just turn that off? All of a sudden everyone can go on and smell acid or anger as there is a knock at the door. And so immediately everybody's like, oh my god, is it the alpha werewolf? And it's like, dude, if it was the alpha werewolf, I'm sure he wouldn't be knocking out the door. Like, I get it. Like, we could go on and assume that this could be like Heisenberg from Breaking Bad, and he is the one who knocks, but still. So, we come to find out that none other than Miller is at the door. When Harlan refuses to let Miller in, Miller is like, well, that's good, because then you can just come out here and we can talk. So, we have Harlan that wants Everett and Blake to go into another room. Miller wants to know who started the fire because he loves that Billy Joel song. Harlan goes out to speak to Miller as Blake and Everett mix out with another of Blake. We have another fantasy makeout where I think Everett goes on and is to be fat and to be dreaming away about a fantasy about Everett and Blake making out. Miller grabs and slams Harlan against the house and keeps asking him if he started the fire. Like, kid, you better tell me. Started that fire. So Luna is calling Garrett about Miller, and Garrett turns his car around. He swerves it around. Miller continues to question Harlan as the Alpha Wolf comes out of the shadows and attacks Miller. Harlan told Luna what happened, and Garrett is also still on the phone with Luna. And so Garrett tells Harlan to go to the stable to get this rifle that is different than the other rifles that he is to, of course, have. Because it has silver bullets in it. Everett and Blake leave the room to think about... No, so Everett and Blake leave their room as both Harlan and Luna go on to the stable. So Everett and Blake are thinking about leaving altogether as they get a call from the voice telling them they're almost safe to not leave. That the moon has almost passed. It's peaked. It's viciously all up in there. So Everett asks if the voice is watching them, because they always feel like somebody's watching them. We have Miller that is to wake up to have the Alpha kind of on him and is trying to drag him off and whichever. Harlan needs to know the combination of the lock from Garrett as they have made it to the stable. As Luna looks at a horse in the stable, so Miller gets dragged off now. So, like, Miller was, like, looking at the alpha werewolf and was seeing it off in the... So, what happened was Miller was in the woods. He woke up. He saw that the alpha werewolf was kind of looking at him. And so now we get where Miller is to be now dragged off by the alpha werewolf daddy and brutally killed. He's like, bones are breaking, like he gets murdered freaking awful. It's brutal. Everett reminds Blake to stay in the house as Blake realizes they won't be safe no matter where they go. The alpha werewolf walks up to both Blake and Everett, and the alpha gets into Everett's face and is to give us that one Alien movie where we have the alien that gets right up to Sigourney Weaver. Sigourney Weaver is going like, ugh! Like that iconic moment. It's basically the same thing. I think that's probably from the one Alien movie where Sigourney Weaver is actually bald and is in that prison. Same kind of style going on here. So Harlan shoots the gun and the alpha runs off. Everett asks why the alpha werewolf just didn't kill them. And again, we have Luna realize because they're connected, because they're now a pack. The alpha and all the rest of them are to now be a pack now. And so we would still have to assume that maybe Connor had gotten cured from him being a werewolf, and that's why the werewolf went on to attack Connor and not Everett and Blake. So I don't know. That just seems weird. So Garrett comes home to have Harlan and Luna ask about the silver bullets that Garrett had made. That the bullets may be used to kill werewolves and possibly also kill Harlan and Luna. As when Harlan asks Garrett, it's like, well, hey, did you make these bullets to kill werewolves? And Garrett is like, yes. And then Harlan asks Garrett, it's like, well, did you make this bullet to kill me and Luna? And Garrett is to state yes. So we find out that Garrett could either be like having this to have been planned all along to kill off these two characters, but why wouldn't he have just sought that out way earlier? But I think the whole plan that Garrett really had was that he was to have these bullets lying around just in case Luna and Harlan were to ever uh, put this world in danger. So he already had this arsenal just lying around. That's kind of like whenever you would see in a Superman comic book or whatever, or even a Superman show of sort, they would always have like a stockpile of kryptonite weapons. And Superman would be looking at these military people like, wow, like I thought that you guys could trust me, but I guess I was wrong. Like, I guess you guys don't trust me at all. And there'd be just several times where Superman would end up in these, like, kryptonite prisons. And that would happen quite often in, like, Superman and Lois. So, with that said, I think I'm going to go on and try to quickly get out of here because I realize how long this video is. I know how long the episode is, but also I could care less. Like, I'm just going to go on and just say what I'm going to say. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.